And I think that the pandemic made everybody realize that, okay, human interaction through this, what we're doing right now through the internet, can be deep. And so I think that there's a switch that went off in the last couple of years in the general populace now that says, okay, this is now fundamentally a part of my life. This digital experience is now fundamentally a part of my life. And I like to do things like put on filters and virtual backgrounds and decorate, right? And that seed, I think, is very, very important for the future of what's to come. And so I think that's a big fundamental change. But I do also think that from a work perspective, these powerhouse places like San Francisco are distributing, right? You look at just in America alone, what's happened? So much distribution of wealth, mentorship, talent, right? Those are your three key ingredients, the key input ingredients into any successful innovative space. Went to Austin, Miami, New York, right? They've distributed around. Will they end up collapsing back on San Francisco? It's entirely possible. But at least for now, it's possible. I mean, my experience, Taipei, right? I went to Taipei, November 2020. All these cool people were there. All these successful entrepreneurs were there. We met lots of local talent. Yes, Gold Card, what a great program. I mean, so that fundamental change, I think, gives an opportunity for all these places around the world suddenly to attempt to build an ecosystem like what you see in San Francisco.
Good local time, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Innovative Minds with Audrey Tang. Remember the old days when live broadcasts were restricted to television only and geographically limited? Well, today, anyone with an internet connection and a smartphone can shape the live views of millions of people via live streaming for free. Good local time, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Innovative Minds with Audrey Tang. Remember the old days when live broadcast was restricted to television and geographically limited? Today, anyone with an internet connection and a smartphone can share and can watch live news or entertainment sessions for free. Many options exist, but one site stands out above the rest: Twitch. Launched in June 2011, this website has changed the way we consume and curate live content online. The site boasts over 140 million monthly visitors and receives more than 2.3 billion hours of video views in its biggest months. So I'm very happy here to welcome Twitch co-founder and outstanding innovator, Kevin Lin. Kevin, hello.
Hello. Hey, Audrey. Thank you for having me on the show. Hello, everybody out there. Hope you're having a great day.
Hi, it's tremendous to have you on the show. When I hosted Steve Chen on the first episode of InnoMinds, we discussed his thoughts on being a YouTuber and how he made the first cat video. And you've helped popularizing a new profession after YouTuber. It's called live streamer or just streamer. How do you explain the success of this emerging role in our fluid media world, and what is the secret of being a perfect streamer?
Oh gosh, being a perfect streamer. Well, so streaming is quite different from online VOD creation, TikTok, YouTube, etc., in that you're really just being yourself. You're really just turning on a camera and doing something, in our case, video games, something you naturally already do, and you are performing. But the best streamers actually are quite natural. They're very much themselves. It's not to say there aren't streamers who are characters or adopt personalities. They very much are, and you're starting to see more and more what we call VTubers, basically cartoon avatars that behind the scenes have a real human acting out and being live transposed, like live, they become a live animated character, for a simple way of saying it. But yeah, I think one of the major things we focused on with Twitch was to create not just the technology for live broadcast around the world. That's indeed how we started. The company started as a product called Justin TV, which in its initial manifestation was in fact a live show about one man, Justin Kan, who was bold enough to stream his life 24/7 for the internet to see, and then it turned into a general live broadcast platform for anyone to do anything. And then we focused it down on video games. Video games naturally lent themselves to observation. Basically, it's easy to watch. It's something we culturally have done for generations. And we just wrapped around not only this product and social behavior, which is largely chat, but also monetization around that. And so streamers were able to sustain themselves and actually make money essentially doing what they were already doing without having to edit, without having to do too many crazy video things. And that's how it all began.
Yeah, I remember a few of my friends were just, part of this demonstration back March 2014 around the parliament, talking about democracy, renewing democracy, while someone else plays Minesweeper in a laptop and just live streaming the content on Twitch, on Justin, because they require at a time some game to be in the foreground. So interesting. So I think being true to oneself is very important in the streaming culture, as you pointed out. And how does your own background, because we understand that you received a bachelor's degree in ecology and evolutionary biology, so all very organic from Yale in 2004. How did your university backgrounds help in those endeavors?
I don't think, well, let's see. Very, very indirectly, I guess I became quite good at Excel, spreadsheets, sort of just ideas, the basic, non-technical, essentially, database management. I did a lot of lab work. I did a lot of research work, and just kind of learned to use Excel and learn to just look at data and try to extract interesting things. But that's a really light way of saying I used the major at all. The major kind of didn't have too much to do with what I was planning to do. I didn't have much of a plan post-college. I certainly didn't think I would end up in technology. I moved to New York after graduating from Yale in 2004. Did a bunch of odd jobs. I worked for the city. I worked for an events planning company. I essentially did event production and coordination for a variety of businesses in New York City, and then eventually joined this beverage company in Boston. They were based in San Francisco, but my brother introduced me to them. He was one of their investors. I joined them to set up their Boston distribution and sales operation. That actually brought me out to San Francisco at the end of 2005, early 2006. And I officially moved to San Francisco January 2006 for this beverage company. And I was working in a warehouse. I was distributing beverages, hundreds of different sodas and teas and waters, non-alcoholic, driving trucks and forklifts. And eventually my friends came to San Francisco in later 2006, and decided to start this company, Justin TV. And I didn't join them right away, just kept in touch with them. And then in 2008, I joined them. And this was Justin TV. This was Justin's live streaming platform. He was actually streaming for the first, many months, almost a year. And then in 2008, when I joined, they had just started to open it up to general use. But no, I didn't use my major much. But I did college. Why is college important? College is important for many reasons. It's academic, of course. You learn a lot of general skills that you might use as you grow into an adult. But importantly for me, this is where I met Michael Seibel, Justin Kan, and Emmett Shear. Ultimately, I didn't meet Emmett till San Francisco, although we technically went to college together. It was because of them that I ended up in knowledge work.
Right, so it's about getting immersed in a very diverse culture with diverse people, and the college, although it's not just about pivot tables or Excel formulas, they may be useful to some degree in the future. But what's the life in the beverage company compared to a startup life? I imagine they must be very different. One is very well defined, and one is, well, anything but well defined. And it takes courage usually to leave this well defined life for literally the unknown. So what pushed you to make such a choice?
Yeah, I mean, the beverage industry, it was a startup. The company I worked for, which was called Adina, was a startup, and in that sense was similar. It had raised venture capital money. The founder, Greg Stelton-Pohl, rest in peace, was the founder of Odwalla. So he had the experience in building a large beverage company that went public, eventually got bought by Coke. And so it had all the makings of a Silicon Valley startup. It's just scale. Beverage is a physical product. It requires things like manufacturing, co-packing, bottle distribution, real estate on a shelf. And it was a tough job. It was a very physical job. We were we were distributing other beverages. We were also selling our own beverage, our own manufactured beverage through standard retail, restaurants, bars, hotels. And it's a physical job. You have to show up, you have to bring bottles, you have to put them on the shelf, you have to fight other invisible competitors, which are visible only on the shelf, and take that real estate. And it was tough. It's a tough scaling business, very interesting business, but very tough scaling business. And I ended up, shifting into technology largely, frankly, because of my friends, because Michael and Justin essentially said, you should really stop working in a warehouse and come work with us. And at the time, I didn't know anything about the internet. I'm non-technical. I'm a business guy. I didn't know how the internet worked. I didn't know how you made money on the internet. I didn't know how bits got sent around the planet. But they asked me to join anyway. And so I would say I was pretty lucky, a little right place for time. But after that, you take a lot of, what I learned from the startup, just being gritty, making sure you're thinking about costs and revenue and doing the math to make sure you don't die. We thought about that a lot at Adina. That's where I cut my teeth on the basics of that. But it was an interesting transition. I mean, the beverage industry, the work I was doing there was not that stressful. It was combination of physical work, a little bit of chase. But I went home at 3 p.m, chilled out. I got to read books, play video games, cook, do whatever I wanted to do. And then I go back to work the next day at roughly, 4 or 5 in the morning, be done in the afternoon. It was a nice and rinse and repeat job. But it fundamentally wasn't ultimately that interesting to me.
So in my experience, innovation starts usually with the desire to provide an answer to an existing problem or an existing challenge. And you just described that you moved from a more well-defined time structure-wise startup to a, much less defined structure. But was there an original idea or concept or vision behind which?
So the very, very original was Justin TV, right? It was a live casting, as Justin had coined. It was about being able to stream your life as much as you want to anyone around the world. And that in itself was the democratization of broadcast. It had been done before, but this was meant to be done at scale so that you could reach millions, if not tens of millions of people or more around the world, and that anybody could do it for free. That was one of the core philosophies of the business. Twitch really came to because we were growing very naturally at Justin TV, but the use cases were all over the place, and it was really hard to define what the product should be. What were we actually building? Who were we really building for? We didn't really know. We had some broadcasters that would come by. There was a guy named Moon Cricket that was a breakdancer. We had Paris Harris in fashion. We had some newscasters. We had some YouTubers that had transitioned over, like iJustine and Shira Lazar. Like, they were testing us out and seeing what it really meant. And the feedback we kept hearing was, what we really like about this platform is the interactivity. We can feel like we're interacting with our audience. They're chatting with us. We're answering questions. They're chatting with each other. And it feels like there's really something here. And the gaming side really came so this game called StarCraft 2 came out. We got the beta. We got access to the beta, and we were playing constantly. And we were watching YouTube videos, and we were noticing that some streamers on Justin TV were using our platform to stream StarCraft, but we saw it more often on other platforms. Again, YouTube in the form of VODs, which were mostly replays with commentary, but they were streaming on platforms like Livestream and Ustream. And we started reaching out to them and saying, hey, why don't you use us? What do you need? What do you need to be successful? What do you want as tools or features on your platform that make it more fun or more interesting or more sustainable for you? And so we started building those tools, many of which were things like live transcoding, so that you could push one HD stream to us and we would automatically transcode down. At the time, people were pushing multiple streams. If you had the bandwidth and the compute power to do so, they were pushing multiple streams for people around the world in case they couldn't pull a 1080p stream down, or it was more like 720 back then. And then they also wanted monetization. So the state of the art at the time was advertising monetization on YouTube. That was basically how creators made money, was a cut of advertising. But our users, as we talked to them, they started to describe different possibilities to us in a bucket that we called user payments, which were subscriptions, donations, et cetera. And we started to build those as well. And that's really when the platform started to build some gravity around it, where streamers, gamers at the time, were starting to throw up subscriptions that were individual channel subscriptions. So even though the content was free, you as a user could subscribe and support purely through patronage. Again, no need to, it's not gate locked. It's not pay gate locked or anything. And people started to pay. People started to contribute to these small communities built around this individual streamer, and support them. And streamers were able to make a living. And then eventually they were able to quit their jobs just to stream all the time.
So seems that similar to the conversation I had with Vitalik Buterin on this show, the real innovation here is to find a sustainable funding model for what we call the commons without suffering from the tragedy of the commons or free rider problem, so that people can, via patronage, to build a networked good where people enjoy it more, it becomes more valuable, more people join, and so on, without the advertisement dynamic in the middle. Is that a fair summary of your original innovation?
It is a fair summary. I mean, it's interesting. We did, maybe we'll talk about this in a bit, but advertising is really become a poison for product design when it comes to consumer products around specifically entertainment and social media, in my opinion.
I know.
We decided to do advertising in the beginning because that was all we had. We were a startup. We had just come out of the recession in 2008, 2009. We were barely profitable. We were disciplined enough in our operations to be just profitable enough. That allowed us to test new things, including Twitch, including another product called SocialCam that we spun out. And it's around the same timeline that Twitch launched. But that discipline allowed us to do that. But it was only advertising. That was really the going form of monetization for a platform like ours, where we had incredible costs. Live streaming was just super expensive, right? You're sending bits at peak, right? You have these massive concurrent audiences that were watching. You're taxing all these various networks just to deliver the content. And so we had to monetize, but advertising, again, because creators essentially told us, look, this is how we monetize on YouTube. This is the only platform we're really familiar with that seems like we're starting to see meaningful income. We're starting to see meaningful revenue from YouTube, primarily in the form of advertisements. There's also sponsorships, which were harder to do. You had to have an agent. Back then they had multi-channel networks that were aggregates of YouTube channels that would then act as essentially an agency to sell to brand agencies, digital agencies on behalf of brands, right? So there's many multi-tiered network of money flow down to your pocket as a content creator. So we did that because it was familiar, right? It was understandable. It was a believable commercialization tool. All the while in our minds thinking, how do we get away from this? How do we lean more into patronage or other tools? Can we ever work directly with game companies so that people could buy from a streamer an item in a game, which is essentially an advertisement, but it's built much more deeply into the platform. And so, yes, that is unfortunately, yes, what we had to do at the time.
Right. So starting from this video platform, gamers and so on, of course, people also use it to share tips, to listen to live music, to just chat in general and so on. So what lies ahead, in your opinion, for the next step in transformation of this new patronage or in-game economy instead of outside of game advertisement economy, in your ideas?
It's interesting. I mean, twofold. I think just the idea of watching content together is really fun. And it's somewhat surprising to me that more forms of this content haven't started to really take off. I think Twitch has certainly extended outside of games into things like music, live events, news, what we called IRL, which then broke up into multi-prong travel shows, just chatting, which is just people just talking head content. And so it's really extended out. But one thing we really, just as a simple idea that we had all the while, was TV marathons. Just watching content with each other. And in fact, Twitch and Amazon, once post acquisition, did work on that sort of watch parties. But I do think that will become a larger thing over time. That is just inherently part of a metaverse style experience, is hanging out, observing what's going on around you. just like in real life. And so that I do think is going to be a critical part, and the understanding, the interaction design around that. Very few people truly understand from a pure video standpoint. Beyond that, I do think, Web3. I'm in this world now. It is unfortunately under not so great a time period right now. But I do think fundamentally, right, what blockchain offers in terms of ownership and immutability makes a lot of sense for what would be a natural evolution of media platforms, where content is tracked, everything is public, everything is traceable, and you could build a better waterfall. Now, the big questions emerge of, does it do the thing we want it to do? As in, basically, does it remove middlemen? Do you end up with more true creator to user directness through an individual platform? Or is there an open source technology that allows for that? My opinion, I think you're going to need a distributor. Every industry in the world essentially has a distributor. Do you need managers and agents and several tiers of agencies and so on and so forth? I don't know. I'm not sure how that part really plays out. But in theory, distribution as a direct layer will sort of become the best version of itself through this new technology, which could reduce the cost of distribution and thus reduce the cost for the creator at the end of the day. Whereas right now it's 30% or so, right, across most platforms. 30 to 50% is what the platforms take. Can we reduce that down so that it's more money for the creators and the creators' teams that they end up building to become more successful?
Right. So what I'm hearing is that the hierarchical institutions, the entrenched ones with various degrees of lock-in, is a more like old institutional model. And what you're imagining is kind of a network model that is more fair, or at least more fun for the creators involved. We'll get to that in the next segment. But just the last question in this segment. So you talk about IRL, and the RL, the real world, really changed. The real life changed for a lot of people around the world during the lockdowns in the past couple of years of pandemic. Now in Taiwan, we didn't really have lockdowns, but we still get a taste of what's it like. For example, I personally went through 7 days of quarantine, right, which changed the RL condition quite a bit. How do you find the pandemic affected the world who see through a very different lens of human connectivity for a couple of years, particularly with the regard of the innovation in watching things together in this redefinition of being together live streaming scene? Has it affected you personally?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think for me personally, I'll just talk the personal part real quick. I think the basic realizations, to sum it at a very super summary, is remote work is entirely possible. I do believe fundamentally you can build friendships through the internet. I grew up doing this, right? Yeah. So does every future generation this is their life. And there's, roughly half of the world that doesn't believe that that's possible. And I think that the pandemic made everybody realize that, okay, human interaction through this, what we're doing right now through the internet, can be deep. And so I think that there's a switch that went off in the last couple of years in the general populace now that says, okay, this is now fundamentally a part of my life. This digital experience is now fundamentally a part of my life. And I like to do things like put on filters and virtual backgrounds and decorate, right? And that seed, I think, is very, very important for the future of what's to come. And so I think that's a big fundamental change. But I do also think that from a work perspective, these powerhouse places like San Francisco are distributing, right? You look at just in America alone, what's happened. So much distribution of wealth, mentorship, talent, right? Those are your three key ingredients, the key input ingredients into any successful innovative space. Went to Austin, Miami, New York, right? They've distributed around. Will they end up collapsing back on San Francisco? It's entirely possible. But at least for now, it's possible. I mean, my experience, Taipei, right? I went to Taipei, November 2020. All these cool people were there. All these successful entrepreneurs were there.
Gold card
we met
holders.
Lots of local talent. Yes, Gold Card. What a great program. I mean, so that fundamental change, I think, gives an opportunity for all these places around the world suddenly to attempt to build an ecosystem like what you see in San Francisco.
Right. So the bridges across time zones has really deepened during the past couple of years. We'll be right back for the second segment, which is bridging between Taiwan and California. And we're back. So, Kevin, your parents emigrated to the U.S. from Taiwan. You were born in Louisiana in 1982. So, I'm told that the weather in Taipei and New Orleans is remarkably similar. Did you frequently visit Taiwan during these wonder years?
I did, yeah. I mean, they're basically the same weather. It's super hot during the summer and humid. There's hurricanes. There's the best time of year is typically October, November, December, and then spring, of course. But yeah, I used to go a lot as a kid. My parents were both teachers, so when I was very young, we would go pretty much every summer. Again, same weather, so it didn't matter to them where we were. And we used to spend time not so much in Taipei as a child, more in Nantou and sort of Taichung area, where my parents grew up. And I didn't really truly start to experience Taipei until much older. But yeah, as a kid, I was there all the time. It was great. I really enjoyed the time I spent there. Pretty carefree back then.
So, as one of the most successful Asian American founders in technology history, you're involved in the Asian American community through this group called Go House, which you also co-founded. So what was the kind of messages you wish to share via this program, this group, with the Asian community in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, Gold House was founded, really our ringleader and now CEO of Gold House, Bing Chen, was really the guy that got a few of us together and under the simple hypothesis and observation that the Asian community wasn't very tight broadly. There were city-based ones and sort of ethnicity-based ones. So there was Chinese groups, Japanese groups, Taiwanese groups, Korean groups, but there wasn't really one that tied it all together and had industries of focus. And so our initial basic plan was, let's get San Francisco Asian community, which is largely founders, investors, and the LA Asian community, which was writers, actors, directors, entertainment folks, and let's just squish them together and see what happens. And one of the very purposeful things we did, and I'll use this as my message to the broader community, is we forced what we called give and gets. And this idea was, as we met for dinner, we would have 20, 40 person dinners, pretty open. We'd talk about certain things. If there was something high level that was interesting that was going on, we would mention it. But in general, it's for people just to network. But we forced people to offer something that they could give to the group, at anybody in the group. So I could say, for me, if you're interested in the games industry, or you're interested in esports, or you're trying to raise money for your startup, let me know. I'm happy to help. And then you'd have to request something. And so I might say, I'm trying to learn about the music industry. I don't know much about it. I'm really interested in it. We're trying to do some stuff in it. Anyone here who has knowledge or network in the music community, please let me know. And it was that simple thing that we did that really started to snowball things. People really started to build meaningful connections. The community was helping each other out, really sort of as a transitive property of friendship, right? Through the original group, we invited each 2 or 3 people. Those 2 or 3 people we vetted. No assholes was our only rule, really, for Gold House. And it worked. It worked really well. And now we're doing lots of different programs. There's a venture fund also for investing in startups. There's all these different future programs in writing, acting. We promote a lot of movies. We promote a lot of books that are written by Asian Americans, and so on. And so to the community at large, ask for help, right? We are Gold House. There are many organizations now very similar to Gold House and also predating Gold House that are there. That if you need help, they're generally willing to offer it. So reach out.
Cool. So it's a organic growth based on mutual help. And in the last couple of years, you also had the opportunity to network locally here in Taiwan and more time in Taipei, not just around video games and innovation, but also the general startup scene. What are your observations on the startup scene in Taiwan as compared to the network that you just described?
Let's see. Taiwan was very interesting this time around. I met people from all walks this experience this last year and a half or so. I will say that those 3 basic ingredients talent, network, and money. I'll just describe each of those. From a talent perspective, for sure, as with pretty much everywhere else in the world, talent is abundant in Taiwan. If I had to roughly describe the difference between talent in San Francisco or New York or in LA versus talent in Taipei, is there is more on average drive in San Francisco than there is in Taipei. It doesn't mean that people are bad. It doesn't mean that people are lazy. It just simply means that the career aspiration for your average Taipei youth is just different. And so from an innovation standpoint, if you want to change that, you have to change that general mentality. And there are many things that feed into that mentality. Of course, there has to be opportunity. I think the thing holding back talent there is generally the culture, the work culture there is it's old school. It's very hierarchical. It's very micromanaging, and there's not a lot of climbing, and there's not a lot of reason to do extra work, so to speak. Right? The ladder, the aspirational ladder in Taiwan corporate culture is not very aggressive, and it's very slow. Big problems. Number two, mentorship. Are there mentors there? Yes. Are they that engaged? Maybe. I don't know. I don't speak Chinese, unfortunately, so I don't have as much insight into this particular point as I wish that I had. But there are now. There are lots of successful global company builders that have been in Taipei for the last year and a half, and they're willing to help. Kai Huang was there from Guitar Hero, Jameson Su, who's built many companies, Steve Chen, obviously, from YouTube, Pat Lee was out there from Rotten Tomatoes. There's tons. But they need to connect. There needs to be connective tissue there. And of course, there are many successful Taiwanese companies where those founders or the executive teams there or former leaders there could also reach down and help teach people, all the basics of business building. And then there's money. Investors there are incredibly cheap and super aggro in general. Not everybody, of course, but like I'd say on average versus San Francisco, where you've got tons of venture capital. And now, since the last 10 years, crazy numbers of angel investors, founders, former VCs, et cetera, that will just give you money for starters. You don't get that in Taiwan. And that is another big problem. If you want to unlock this, innovation hurricane that you saw in the last couple of decades here in San Francisco, you need all those ingredients. And the good news is the talent's there. They need to see, right? They need to see a vision of, I can be a successful founder. They need the money and they need the mentorship. And then, of course, all the other stuff starts to happen. But I'd say those last two things, not so strong yet. And the money problem, the funding problem is a really big issue for Taipei. But I feel like it's starting to change. I do feel like things are starting to get more better there. But that's my basic observation there. There's lots of people too with so much money. These old families that have been there that want things to change. Actually, they want to affect this, and I think it's really just about now getting all the building blocks together that would unlock that. It would unlock the mentorship and the global network. It would unlock, and then it would allow the talent to do their thing.
Right. I want to focus on the mentorship part because a lot of the drive you just described, because I've also been into coaches, is not afraid of asking very stupid questions to someone that you respect very much. And there's less of that, right, of a kind of inhibition and so on that I witnessed in the Silicon Valley culture. But in Taiwan, it takes tremendous courage just to raise your hand and asking for help, so to speak. And you also mentioned in some of your interviews the importance for founders to seek not just mentorship on the business, but also on the personal growth side, even mental health side, counseling and things like that. How do you find the difference between the different coaches that we just mentioned in this regard in seeking like personal growth through mentorship in both work and also life?
Yeah, this is a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, that not only is the mental health side really important, but it's also the like self-security, self-awareness side of things, where you have to realize like you're probably not that smart. You might think you're smart, but chances are you're not that smart as an average founder, right? Like we didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how the internet worked. I knew nothing about it. And yet we asked people and people were willing to help. I think the realization that people are willing to help and they're probably just as curious as you are, is something that an average, like it does, yeah, going one layer down, Taiwanese are not really taught this in school.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really taught to ask questions, right? Whereas the US curriculum, I wouldn't say is executed very well.
Mm-hmm.
At the core is problem solving. At the core is team exercises. At the core is asking questions, right? You're rewarded for asking questions, where I feel like I've never been to school in Taiwan. People tell me that's not the case. You're more taught rote memorization and execution of that memorization. And that's how the education system works. And that's an important distinction on average. And so there's that. And then extrapolating from there, this is more Asian culture, I think, broadly, is, you have to be strong. You have to be you have to be all about the self, and you can't ask for help. That means, what does it mean? You don't ask for help on average, right? You ask for, your tendency is less than an average American. You don't seek a sounding board when you are depressed or have anxiety or uncertain about what to do. And you certainly don't seek therapy. And if you talk to most founders here, now, I wouldn't say in the early 2000s this was necessarily the phenomenon, right? Certainly Gen X, as they grew up here in America, were much more about being, strong-willed men and, damn good businessmen and persistent and aggressive and all about being greedy, essentially. That shifted a lot in the millennials, and especially the younger millennials, where wellness and mental health is ever more important, and things like burnout are something that you try to avoid for not only yourself as a founder, but also your entire company and team. And so that shifted a lot, starting, I'd say, post-recession, and investors would say, find a coach, find a therapist, right? And so now you've got investors in their best form are also mentors, right? And so now your mentors and the people who gave you money are actually telling you to do this thing. That helped a lot. I think that helped in general the innovative capacity of Silicon Valley, but that you don't get that in Taiwan.
Yeah, the Ministry of Health and Welfare just recently dedicated a entirely new department towards psychological health, mental welfare. And I think this is definitely the direction that we need to pave the way to not just normalize, but just encourage people to talk more instead of just resisting the surface pressure, right, on their lives, especially during the founding journey. So the last question in this segment before we move to Web3. In your previous interview, you've once shared that there are 3 R's critically important in your life, and they are reimagination, resilience, and rebuild. And so we talked quite a bit about the importance of imagination, resilience, and so on. What does rebuild mean? And what's your interpretation to those 3 R's?
So to be honest, those 3 R's were the theme of the conference that I gave that talk at. So I filled in. Right. But I'd say rebuild to me right now is Web3. Web3 is an opportunity for us to correct the errors that we made in building what is effectively the thing that takes up the most of our time in our life outside of sleep and work, which is the internet. How do we take what is essentially just a new data structure in blockchain, data ownership structure, and redo everything? There's a big white space there, in my opinion, on everything from entertainment platforms and social media, the things that we spend 4 to 6 hours a day on. Think about younger audience. Video games, about an hour and a half. Twitch, if you're a video gamer, Twitch is another 90 minutes. Netflix is another hour. YouTube plus Instagram plus Snapchat plus TikTok plus whatever's new, another 45 minutes to an hour, and that's pretty much all of your time outside of work, sleep, homework, family time, friend time. And so how do we rebuild that more responsibly is the thing I've been thinking about the most. Excellent.
So we'll be in the next segment talking about life after Twitch into the world of Web3. Be right back. So we're back. Kevin, in November 2020, you announced via a Medium post that you're leaving Twitch, and the message read in a quote, "You're looking forward to spending time with family and loved ones, some sleep, some relaxation, some fitness, and of course, a lot of video games, end of quote. What games have you played the most in the past 18 months, and how's life rolling along?
The game I'm stuck on is actually Teamfight Tactics. It's a Riot game. It's built on the League of Legends IP, but it's like a hybrid almost. It's like a match 3 card game / tactics board. And so you roll cards. Those cards are hero units. You try to match 3 and they upgrade a level. You try to get 3 level 2s and they go to level 3. And then you put them on a board and they have like classes and sort of spells and things like that. You try to match them in a stack, and then you get more power as they grow, as you get more sort of common matches. But it's a tactics game. It's auto battles, so you're not clicking all over the place, although there are moments where you need to click really quickly. But it's a really fun game, very, very strategic. A lot of randomness too, unfortunately. Unfortunately, that makes it kind of fun. But I've been playing that, and then lately just been playing actually racing games, because racing games and just other games for research reasons. But yeah, Teamfight Tactics is definitely my go-to right now. Other than that, life's rolling along as it always does. Everything is good. Excited to go back to Taipei. But yeah, building has been fun again. Working with the team has been fun again. So
you've got a team in Taipei, right? You've raised some Series A financing for this meta theory idea. So did you want to bring us up to speed in this exciting venture?
Yeah, so Meta Theory is a Web3 interactive entertainment company. So we're building games, we do interactive online content, videos, comics, and so on. We have other interactive storytelling tools that we're launching soon. But that whole, in a nutshell, the goal is to build a game with an economy in it. That is built on blockchain, that eventually unfolds into more of a metaverse style experience. And we're building our own IP, very focused on lore and narrative and art. But of course, the gameplay is critical as part of that strategy. And we plan to roll out new IP over time, assuming we are successful. We raised 24 million from Andreessen, Pantera, FTX, Dragonfly, and a few other funds. We have 16 people in Taipei. Really excited to build a team out there. We plan to more than double the team in Taipei, or across Taiwan. Really, we're sort of open-minded. We're a very remote team. Most of the rest of the team is in America, although we have some folks in the Philippines, Sweden, Hong Kong, and India. So we are scattered about. But I do like the concept of building a team, a physical team like the old school days in a place, and excited to make Taipei one of those places. But yeah, that's the vision. I've always wanted to make a game. My friends and I always wanted to make a game. So we decided to do it in hard mode by adding a whole crypto economy into it when we don't really even know what we're doing, making a video game. So we're having to learn to do both, but it's been really fun doing so.
Excellent. Yeah, you mentioned Web3, and for many people here, certainly for many of our audience, they hear about Web3 and think about this kind of immutable ledger of things where people keep their accounts, their collections, and things like that. That maybe the startup goes away, but the data doesn't go away, and kind of this persistent data integrity is people's kind of first reaction when hearing about the term Web3. Are there some other angles of Web3 that you would like to introduce to our audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to video games and the future metaverse, however you yourself define it, I think the 3D avatar part of the metaverse is maybe one potential future outcome, but the metaverse already, in my opinion, largely exists. It's a place you go, hang out, you might exchange some things, but you participate in the digital world, what you might do in the real world. So this is, a metaverse experience. A Zoom conference is a metaverse style experience. I think the things we think about a lot when it comes to games are interoperability. And so that means taking my digital asset on chain and bringing it somewhere else. In our case, our worlds will all interoperate, and we hope that others do too. And so you could take something you earned in Duskbreakers, which is our first sci-fi IP, and you could go into Sandbox, you can go into Decentraland, you can go into whatever's to come in the future. That's really one of the this philosophical spirits of this whole movement. Composability is another one. There's all these things. So the idea is, how do you recreate at a basic form? How do you recreate yourself on blockchain, in the internet? What would you look like? What would you care about? What might you own? How might you transfer something that you own? Can I buy a record in the metaverse and lend it to a friend versus forcing everybody to buy a record just like you can in the real world, et cetera, et cetera? How do you recreate those really common interactions and make it fair and transferable as much as you could in the real world? Is sort of the general goal, in my opinion, in the way we think about things. What other terms are there? I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's like the hardest part is the token and helping people understand that as a currency. A currency is very complex, of course, in the real world. It is designed to be a medium of exchange. It is designed to be a store of value. In society, that's over design. Like we've overdone it, right? And so if you experience some of these smaller metaverse experiences online right now, like VR chat, people are sort of exchanging things with each other with just because it's just why not? Like, here's the thing I made. Take
that's
it.
Just
you got
what
cool.
humans do, right?
That's what humans do. Give each other stuff. We take stuff, right? That's it. Yeah.
Cool. Right. So the 3 in Web3 is not about three-dimensional avatars, it seems. It's more about having a fabric to give and share and exchange much closer to the real world as compared to the Web 1 or Web 2 worlds, where people simply just, was part of this technological stack where you have to publish in a certain format, it has to be aggregated in a certain place, and when that place goes away, well, everything goes away. Yeah,
in essence, you can verify something is yours. That's the most one of the most important aspects of it. And so, when people look at NFTs, it's like, oh, I could just right click and save it. Now it's mine. I can put it somewhere else. You can't police it. That's true. That's true. Today, if you did that, if you Snapchat, if you screenshotted someone's Bored Ape and put it on your Twitter, all they can do is really bother you and try to get their friends to bother you to take it down, right? But do people really care about that? Not really. Not really in the way that people are describing in the metaverse, whether that's an avatar. I think a 3D thing, an art, a graphic, will ultimately be a manifestation of you online. Is that going to be a human avatar, as Meta believes, Facebook believes, and so on? I don't know. Maybe in some cases people want to be human. In some cases you might want to be an orc or a box with eyeballs. I don't know. You can be whatever you want. And so, is there some physical representation of you, some shape, some object that represents you on the internet? Yes, of course, there will be that. Right? What is it going to look like? Oh, I'm not so sure.
And you mentioned in your Medium post that you want to build a game because you think you want to continue exploring a world where technology is a positive amplifier in our lives. So talk a little bit more about how this vision you just described can become a positive amplifier, because, tech and a positive amplifier in our lives isn't quite synonyms nowadays as compared to 20 years ago.
Yeah. If I had the answer to this now, I mean, I can sort of start to describe how we're thinking about it, or how I'm thinking about it. I mean, I'd say in the early days of Twitch, it felt like a very small community, directly adjacent to another, very close by. And so you might come to Twitch to watch one particular streamer. Let's say you came to watch, CodeMiko, new virtual streamer that I love, VTuber that I love. She has a bunch of friends that she streams with these days, and so sometimes she'll send people, oh, my show's ending, go watch over here, go watch over there. But at the end of the day, like, you're there around this one campfire, which is a creator, and it felt really nice. And in fact, in the early days, people would just sit and chat even when the creator wasn't on, because they became a community. Not huge, a couple hundred people, but it felt very close. There was this closeness there. And so I think our networks have just gotten too large. They're huge, right? The whole purpose of Facebook and TikTok is to keep the masses at bay in attention to their platform. Stay with us. And what do? They optimize a lot of the network effects and social features that they have work because so many people are on there at the same time. And so I don't know what you do about that, honestly. But can you start and rebuild these smaller social connections from the ground up? And yes, they necessarily need to get bigger, right? That's just how we are. Humans want that. They want the larger and larger connective tissue to continue to evolve over time. But can you do it in a way where it's not about time obsession, where you're there because the platform gives you true utility, practical utility that is a service to you that they don't need to abuse. And that's it. Like that's what we're trying to figure out now. And our version of that is games. Of course, games is not just a game. It's not just the, use your mouse and keyboard or controller or thumbs to like play something. There's connective tissue there too. There's guilds, there's clans, there's chat, there's voice chat, there's coordination. And so can you use game mechanics and that type of interaction design to build out something that is a social experience that can expand from there, that isn't just about playing the game? You need the game as a hook, and that hook has to be fun, it has to be good, it has to be engaging, but then you can expand out from there.
Yeah, I think a lot of young people learn about good governance and about community coordination through guilds in the games, which are the kind of campfires you describe, and not the forest fires that you also describe for those very large multinational platforms. So starting campfires, not forest fires. And what are your like you talk about mentorship. So what are your advices or your thoughts? You want our next generation of innovators, because this show is mainly aimed to people around 18, even slightly younger, who want to be innovative and create interesting campfires in the world. Are there any thoughts you would like to share with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think question everything, right? You use these platforms that you use and that take up a lot of your time because they are interesting, because your friends are there, because you can, in the best version of them, they teach you stuff. They teach you about other parts of the world. They teach you about subject matter that you may not have had access to in a really easy to consume way, and so on. They do so many things for society. The question, as you think about building, like, what are the underpinnings here that make it bad? There are many things, not just advertising, not just a reliance on data, which is also tied to advertising, of course, not just a reliance on their business model being the more time you spend, the more money I make. Question those things and innovate. That not only is the thing you're building, whether it's a consumer product or a business product, what it does for the consumer, the user experience and the user interface, and whatever extension from there, whether social or otherwise, you're also building that, but you're also building the commercialization of that. How does it survive? How does this thing I'm building survive? And that means you need to make money, or you need to have really low costs. But you still need to make, no matter what, you need to make money. No matter what, you have to pay humans to do the thing. Even if your online costs are very low, even if your user acquisition costs are very low, you still got to pay humans to do it. So you always have costs no matter what. So what are you thinking about from a commercialization standpoint? I think that's frankly, when we were growing up in 2006 through the recession in this tech boom, a lot of venture investors said, don't worry about monetization, just grow.
Yep.
We will give you money if you can grow to survive. And so you are deliberately deferring this thought. You're deliberately deferring the thought of, what does it mean to have a transaction with my user? Are they giving me money? Is someone else giving me money? Is a third party, another person giving me money through this person so that I can survive as a platform? And we were taught actually to defer that. Now, it's not that we didn't think about it, of course, because you have to think about it, because you have to eventually realize, okay, I have to survive. But there's this artificial input of venture money. Now, artificial, not in a negative way, right? Venture money starts a lot of the engine of innovation. But that advice of don't worry about this really important part meant that a lot of people back then didn't really think about it. And so those platforms ultimately fall into, oh, well, what do the big platforms do? Well, they just do advertising, so let's just do that. And so in many cases, the advice of just grow is still good, right? It's still valid advice. But like my takeaway in my life is think about that, right? Think about the commercialization aspect of what it is that you're building, because it's very important. At some point, you have to do it. And at that very point, if you haven't started thinking about what are the basic features and tools in your platform that people are using as you get there, you may not have a choice to truly innovate there. So you have to be very thoughtful about it over time.
Right, because if founders don't think about it, well, their customers end up becoming their products, and then we replicate all the Web2 issues, the negative externalities all over again. Thank you, Kevin. Indeed, a great sharing today. I know originally the interview would have been done physically, but still, thanks to streaming technology, we can still talk in such a smooth way. But hopefully next time, when you're back in Taiwan, we can meet in person and have another talk.
I would love that. Yes. And thank you so much for having me on the show. And look forward to seeing you in Taiwan soon.
Thank you. And to our audience, thank you for joining today. And please check the information and video on TaiwanPlus.com. We also have a YouTube channel. If you like today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share. Audio version is available on the main podcast platforms. We also look forward to seeing your comments. See you next time. Live long and prosper.